Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into a story of crime, power, and more than anything, revenge. A vicious cycle that chewed up an entire community for decades.
And we're going to start this one right in the middle of the chaos, on a night when everything came to a very violent and very gruesome end.
Picture this, an upscale apartment in Defense, Karachi. Bollywood music is blasting. A notorious gangster, Arshad Papu, is celebrating with his brother. He's just gotten out on bail, and for a minute there, he probably thinks he's safe. He has no idea this is his last party. And just a few feet away, in another room, his 10-year-old son is totally lost in a video game, completely unaware that this is the last time he'll ever see his father alive. That single moment is going to fuel the next turn of the wheel, the next cycle of revenge. Then, suddenly, the doorbell rings. The music stops. A friend goes to look through the peephole, and you can just see the color drain from his face. In an instant, that party atmosphere just curdles into this thick, quiet fear. The door just bursts open. In walk 3 police inspectors armed to the teeth. And right behind them are the henchmen of Uzair Baloch, men who are thirsty for Arshad Papu's blood. Their goal is simple: abduction and then murder. But to really get the sheer hatred that led to this moment, we need to rewind a clock, way back. You see, this story really begins a full generation earlier, back at a time when these bitter enemies were actually the closest of allies. So back in the 70s and 80s, you had 2 main guys running the underworld in Liari. On one side, there was Haji Lalu, Arshad's father, a real godfather-type figure. And on the other, Dodgeable, the father of the infamous Rehman Dakaat. They each had their own turf, their own drug empires. Now, here's the thing that's kind of wild. These 2 powerful families, they weren't just at peace. They were allies, deeply allied. They had family ties, they worked together, they even carried out revenge for each other. I mean, at one point, Haji Lalu's own gang hunted down and killed the guy who murdered Rehman Dakaat's cousin. That's how close they were. So, you have to ask, right? How did this powerful alliance between the next generation, between Arshad Papu and Rehman Dakaat, how did it shatter so completely, so violently? I mean, Arshad and Rehman, these guys grew up together. They weren't just partners in crime. They literally married into the same family. They were brothers-in-law. Their lives, their businesses, everything was completely tangled up together. And then, in 1995, that bond just shatters. Rehman and Arshad's brother get arrested together. Haji Lalu, the father, swoops in and bails out his own son, but just leaves Rehman to rot in jail. Rehman asks Lalu, hey, use my own money, it's about 1 crore rupees, to get me out. But Lalu just denies the money even exists. And that one single act of betrayal, that was the seed for a bloody gang war that would go on for decades. A couple of years later, Rehman manages to escape from custody. And that little seed of betrayal, it doesn't just sprout, it explodes into an all-out war. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about Badla, revenge. Arshad Papu demanded that a local transporter, a guy named Faizu Mama, start paying him protection money. But Faizu was an old friend of Rehman's father, and out of loyalty, he refused. For that refusal, Arshad Papu had him kidnapped and executed. The brutality just escalated. It became personal and terrifying. Arshad kidnapped Rehman's own uncle, called Rehman on the phone, and forced him to listen to his uncle's screams. Then he murdered him, basically daring Rehman to try and stop him. But Arshad still wasn't done. He then did something that, in their culture, is, well, it's the ultimate taboo. He went to the graveyard, and he dynamited the graves of Rehman's mother and father, even ran them over with a bulldozer. It was an act of pure, profound disrespect, designed to inflict the deepest wound possible. And the cost of all this hate was just staggering. In only a few years, as the whole city of Karachi was dragged into this personal feud, hundreds and hundreds of people were killed. Okay, so now let's bring this story full circle. Because this kind of violence, it doesn't just go away. It creates new Avengers. This is how all that history ties back to that tragic party we started with. By 2013, the whole chessboard had changed. Rehman Dakaat was dead, killed by police. Arshad's powerful father, Haji Lalu, died mysteriously in prison. And in Rehman's place, his successor rose up, a man named Uzair Baloch, who became even more powerful.
And here's the key. Uzair had a very personal score to settle. That transporter who Arshad Papu had murdered all those years ago, Faizu Mama, that was his father.
So on that night in March 2013, Uzair Baloch finally got his revenge for his father's death. The brutality it's hard to even imagine. Arshad Papu was dragged to Lyari, and in front of a crowd, he was tortured and dismembered while he was still alive. They played football with his head, and then they burned what was left of him. It was a public spectacle designed to terrorize and to broadcast very clearly the finality of Uzair's revenge.
And this is where the cycle chillingly completes itself. That 10-year-old boy playing video games, the one who watched his father get dragged away, he never forgot the faces he saw that night. 8 years later, now a young man himself, he allegedly exacted his own badla, assassinating 2 of the police inspectors involved in his father's murder before he was arrested. A son's revenge for a father's death.
But after all this bloodshed, you gotta ask a question. Was this really just a story about gangsters fighting over turf and honor and these deep family feuds? Or was there something bigger going on here? Well, the evidence suggests a much bigger game was being played. You had gangsters holding meetings out in the open, in graveyards, with plainclothes police acting as their security. Guys like Haji Lalu were supposedly so powerful, they could influence who got promoted in the police, who got appointed in the courts. These gangs weren't just criminals, they were used as muscle for political rallies. They had deep, deep connections to the city's political and security establishment. And that leaves us with this one final, really provocative thought. Were these men, Arshad Papu, Rehman Dakaat, Uzair Baloch, were they truly the masters of their own violent fates, driven by their own personal need for revenge? Or were they just bloody instruments, disposable pawns being moved around on a much larger, much more powerful chessboard, controlled by forces we never even get to see?